welcome to another episode of Kiwi Car Life, and most importantly, welcome to summer. Probably. Anyway, we're in Wellington and it's blowing like an absolute gale, but we are here now to film two utterly rubbish cars. This is a 1994 Honda Accord 5-speed manual. This is a 1997 Honda Civic 5-speed manual, and we're going to be seeing which of these cars is not the worst. Let's start on the exterior, and surprisingly there are some quite noticeable differences. The Accord has some much sleeker looking headlights with the indicators kind of integrated into the bumper, whereas the Civic has some much more sort of bulbous looking lights. The Civic also has a quite nice looking black and chrome grille with these classic sort of bumper edges, but both of these cars have quite a nice looking black lip kit that runs all the way around the outside of the car. Round back, the Accord has a quite cool looking twin exit exhaust, whereas the Civic just has an ordinary single exit one. And to my eye, I think the Accord also looks a little bit better at the back end, namely just because it has these sort of red and white lights rather than the rainbowy coloured ones on this car, and it has some nice premium metal badges as well, as opposed to the stickers here on the Civic. Finally, both of these cars are finished in equally 90s colours. This is sangria red and this is sour green. The interiors of these cars are actually surprisingly similar as well, even going as far as having the exact same indicator and wiper stalks. However, the Civic does have a slightly different steering wheel with an airbag. The gauge clusters show the exact same information. However, I happen to think that the Accord's one looks just a little bit more premium, as you would expect with it being the higher spec car. And both of these cars also, amazingly enough, still have the original 1990s Alpine stereos that Hondas used to come with back in the day, and both of them also have some quite nice, very classic digital clocks. Both thankfully have air conditioning, and they both operate in a very, very similar manner, and of course both of them are 5-speed manuals. However, I happen to think that the Accord's one feels a little more premium, has that nice notchy feel to it, whereas the one on the Civic is definitely a little more woolen. Finally, this Accord happens to have leather seats, although it was available with cloth seats as well, and that Civic just happens to have the normal cloth seats. With both of these cars being Hondas, they are naturally front-wheel drive, and as you saw before, they're both paired with 5-speed manual transmissions. However, the engines are a little bit different. The Civic here has a 1.6 litre single-cam VTEC D16Y6 with 88 kilowatt and 145 newton meters, whereas the Accord has a 2.2 litre single-cam non-VTEC F22 B3 with 104 kilowatt and 190 newton meters. Where it gets really interesting though is how little these cars weigh. This Civic is just 1,140 kilos for a pretty substantial size sedan, and this one is just 1,300 kilos. But what that does translate to is these cars having almost exactly the same power to weight ratio. So it'll be very interesting to see how they drive. Okay, so it's at this point we're going to see how incredibly slow this car is by doing a 0 to 100 time. There we go, gentlemen. 11.6 seconds. Okay, so now let's see what 0 to 100 time the Accord can do. Okay, I must say I am pleasantly surprised. That was an 11.8. So in fact the Civic is faster. Who would have thought? So what is this Civic like to drive? Well, first of all, I have to say I've actually been pleasantly surprised with the performance of this car. I expected it to be excruciatingly slow, and it is. But it's not as bad as I thought, I have to say. And fundamentally it's quite fun to drive. It handles pretty good. Steering is obviously an extremely slow rack and is quite vague on centre, as you can see, but it handles decently well thanks to double wishbone suspension on all 4 corners, and naturally, of course, with it having tiny little wheels and a very soft ride, it is extremely comfortable. The seats are quite nice as well. I would like it if it was a little lower, you know, a slightly lower driving position, so you felt like you were more sitting in the car rather than on it. But it's, I guess, not really that type of car. The gearbox is a little bit of a letdown. I've come used to, you know, everyone telling me, oh, Hondas have such great feeling gearboxes. This one, if I'm honest, is a little bit disappointing. It's quite sloppy, and look at the amount of movement it has in gear and so on. It's was a surprise to say the least. Handling around the roundabout, bit of body roll, not a whole lot of grip, but it zips around fine, man. It's perfectly okay. I quite enjoy driving this, I must say. Okay, so how does the Accord compare to the Civic? Well, first of all, it's definitely noticeably quieter and more comfortable. And all the interior quality and everything is definitely more premium in the Accord. All the switchgear and so on has a much nicer feel. And just simple stuff like the quality of the clutch and the gearbox feel is definitely better in this Accord. I actually really enjoy driving this Accord. It's fun through corners. You know, you put your foot down and you get some noise from the front end of the car. One thing that does surprise me about these cars is that the Civic is by far the more popular modified car of choice. The EK hatch or sedan, there are thousands and thousands, probably millions of them across the world that have been modified and engine swapped to no tomorrow. And it does surprise me because like the Accord is in many ways a better car, but maybe the Civic is a better chassis. I don't know, I don't want to get into too many controversial topics there. I think stock for stock, I would say the Accord is better, and both of these cars are pretty much completely worthless. So if you just want a runner, try and get an Accord if you can. But you know, if you're looking for a sporty car, let's say we were comparing the SIR version of this and like the VTIR or even the Type R Civic, then yeah, probably the Civic is the better, more sportier option. Well, there we go. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Kiwi Car Life, and if you want to see another review of an old Honda, then click over here to see a review of an EF hatch, and click over here to see a review of my CL9 Accord, the other car that I have here. And feel free to check out some of my other videos as well, upload every Sunday. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Kiwi Car Life, and I'll see you later. Giddy out, they found a tape for the other car.